Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful day so far. Today, in this edition of Solving Your Problems, I have for you whether you should be selling Chris Wood for Cody Gakpo or just in general. We'll be looking at the benching dilemmas, of course, of which there are many. We'll be looking at Liverpool assets yet again and how some injury updates have impacted certain players and other assets as well. If you have not subscribed around here, consider doing so, not only for the analysis, but also to cash in on some of the luck myself and many people in the comment section have been having. Multiple top 100s, top 1Ks, top 10Ks, and that too at a seriously high volume. So consider subscribing if you have not already, and consider getting this video to 400 likes. I know it's posted slightly late, so apologies for that. But without anything else needing to be said, let's get into the video. Let us start with what is usually in first position, press conference and injury updates. Now, to the best of my knowledge, Arne Slot has actually been misquoted a few times today on X. However, to the best of my knowledge, the correct quote is, he is now coming to a moment where he can play 3 times a week in relation to Ibrahima Konate and a fitness update on him. As mentioned yesterday, Konate was managing a knee injury and still is. He rushed back from injury after Joe Gomez got injured and has been playing with painkillers to essentially get through the games. However, the fact that the injury is healing and at the rate for Arne Slot to say something like this, because playing 3 games a week when you're somewhat injury prone and you're managing an injury is not easy at all. The fact he's getting them makes me very confident in his expected minutes. I would say to the 95th percent, right? 95th degree. I really am quite confident in his expected minutes, given his dislike for fielding Kwanzaa in these bigger, more important games. And the fact that he had his rest against Lille, the fact he'll get rested against Plymouth as well, most likely, and the fact he'll get rested against PSV as well. However, there is a section later on Liverpool, but I just thought I'd provide you with an update. On the contrary, someone who is also quite injury prone isn't going to be there for the weekend and maybe out for a few weeks as well. That's what Enzo Maresca has said. Now, this certainly has implications on this Chelsea side. Our defense is undoubtedly worse without him. I mean, why wouldn't it be? You have a number 6 with huge dueling capacity, a brilliant level of physicality, and someone who's super press resistant, considering the way we play as well. So helpful, right? So that has direct and indirect effects in a negative way on our team. And to be honest, given his injury record, I wouldn't be surprised if the reintegration becomes a little bit slower than it would for other players and he's slightly more carefully managed. So yeah, that's definitely a blow to us. And I think going away to the Etihad without him and only having Caicedo, because obviously we loaned out Ugochukwu as well, slightly tough. So I guess you can, it's a good thing for attacking Manchester City assets if you still own Erling Haaland or you got Phil Foden. But on the flip side, Ruben Diaz is injured. And this is a big blow for Manchester City because when he's been in the side this year, they've been much better. Just look at his performance away at Ipswich. Very solid. And I think had they had anyone else in that role, they would have suffered. It's not just the fact that he's very useful on the ball, but I think the indirect effects of essentially having a worse defense, meaning you probably have to defend a little bit more in general, and the fact that you may look to increase retention in your side through personnel selection or through an instruction or the system, meaning that you're slightly less direct and attacking and dangerous in nature when going forward. So for all of those reasons, I just think that will hurt City. And then moving on to what is arguably the most important one for FPL this time around, Callum Hudson-Odoi's injury. Now, there is some analysis on this later, so I won't talk about it too much now. However, I do not think this is Chris Wood. I do not think this is good for Chris Wood. And I know it talks about their transitions, ability to hold the ball in such an intense game and his relationship with Wood. I'll touch on that later in the selling Chris Wood section. One thing that isn't mentioned here is that William Saliba should be back training next week, which means that he probably plays the game against City. So if you are looking to offload Raya to Alisson, I would say that is certainly a reason to be slightly less bullish on that move, on top of the fact that I already really don't like the Alisson move. So yeah, just clearing up some of the injuries there. Bowen's meant to be back in training quite soon and could even be available for the weekend, which is very quick considering the nature of the injury. Yeah, just a few things to consider. If you would like to join 2 members of the top 50 in the world, if you would like to join people who are consistently improving their ranks, and if you would like to join a community where you can meet like-minded people who love FPL, and on top of that, get exclusive football analysis and FPL help consistently, given how active the group chat is, or the 1-hour Q&A calls, which we had last night, extended to an hour and a half, and we spoke about a lot, and it was just a fantastic discussion overall, and a wonderful way to connect with other people. If you would like any or all of that, then as you can see on screen, the membership tiers are available to you. Link in the description. Go and click it. Take action now. Minimum downside, maximum upside. And I would love to see all of you. Moving on to the staple piece of solving your problems, benching dilemmas. These are all of the players that I think could be benched in your sides, or at least the more popular ones. João Pedro, Morgan Rogers, Raul Jimenez, Ismail Assar, Antoine Semenyo, Amad Diallo, Anthony Robinson, Daniel Munoz, Ola Aina, and Gabriel. But we're not going to start with any of those. We're going to start with Lewis Hall. And why? Why would we start with Lewis Hall? Well, that's kind of my point. I've seen people toss his name around in terms of being benched. Now, whilst I appreciate that Southampton could score, and it actually came across my mind to bench him at some point in the week, I think it's just such an unnecessary risk to take. And it's such a interesting decision whereby you are happy to accept benching such huge upside and accept less upside by the player you're playing, right? Because it is Southampton away. Newcastle can score goals. You look at how often Lewis Hall gets forward. You look at how he can return points. It's not just overlapping crosses as it is for other fullbacks, but he can come inside, operate from the half space, but he plays a little pass into Gordon or Isak, and then they finish and he gets an assist from there. Set pieces, even shots when he comes inside, different types of assists, different types of passes. He's got all of that in the locker, and his role and position allows that. So for me, you kind of have to start him this game. If you don't want to, I understand. I get it. I really do, because Southampton certainly have enough firepower and they played enough of an aggressive style whereby they can score. But for me, I just wouldn't be benching Lewis Hall. I think there's probably not a single other defender with the upside that he has this week, aside from the Liverpool lot, who you're definitely not benching. But out of these guys, there's no one I'd play over him. For example, Munoz, Aina, Bournemouth away, Brentford at home, 2 brilliant attacks. I wouldn't be messing with that. But moving on to the rest of them. One of the most popular ones, and probably the most popular one each and every week, is João Pedro versus Morgan Rogers. So I'll start there. I am now higher on Morgan Rogers than I was initially. Onana's out, which means that he's not going to play a double pivot of Onana Kamara with Tielemans further forward, because he simply doesn't have one of them. And they don't also have a like-for-like replacement, whereby someone's going to come into the side and play that exact type of role. Now, they did something, I guess, similar to their initial approach against Arsenal when the substitute came on. But I personally don't think they'll do that from the off against West Ham. I don't think they'll show him the same type of respect that they did to Arsenal. So I think he reverts back to a 4-2-2-2, which means that Rodgers probably goes up top and plays next to Watkins or Duran. Ramsey off the left, maybe Bailey on the right, and then Onana, Kamara, Tielemans pivot. And that's better for Rodgers, right? Because I've spoken about this week how when he's operating in that right-hand side role, it's not as good for his output. And I just can't see him playing that this time around. I expect Jacob Ramsey to start because he was benched midweek. And then they obviously lost as well, right? So for those reasons, I'm higher on Morgan Rogers than I was initially. So I would be playing him over João Pedro. Brighton don't fare so well in these types of games. They haven't done this season. And João Pedro, in general, is absolutely sound. And I would start him over most of the players listed here, but just not Morgan Rogers. Moving on to a few of the other clearer-cut ones for me. Gabriel starts. I mean, Wolves aren't very good at defending set pieces. In fact, they're probably the worst team in the league. And Gabriel's the biggest box threat in the league, especially when Mikel Merino doesn't play. So for me, he starts. It's also a bit of an unnecessary risk to take. You're opening up so much downside because you don't own Arsenal defense, and then you're losing the upside from the fact that he can actually get a 15-pointer somewhat realistically. So I would just leave that alone and let him start. For me, Ama stays on the bench. And there are a lot of other good options like Rogers, João Pedro, and some of the other ones listed who we'll come on to. But away to Fulham, tough game. Tough game for anyone to go there and score quite a few goals. And it's not like United are flying at the moment. And in these games where they try and take a little bit more onus to control it, which I imagine they'll do away at Fulham, even though I don't think they're a better side than them. It just doesn't go too well for them. He could also play wing back. Again, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bruno play in the front three and then, maybe Garnacho plays with him. Maybe not. But regardless, he could even get some minutes of wing back. And I personally don't think you want that. I know he scored a hat-trick not so long ago, but I just don't trust Man United. And that's why I'm not bringing any of the assets in, amongst other reasons. And now let's go on to the rest. Jimenez. See, this is the thing, right? Jimenez is a fine prospect this week, but it depends on who you have to bench him, right? And all of you will be in different spots. So I will give a overview of what I think of the asset, and then you can kind of apply that to your particular dilemma. I think Jimenez is fine. I don't think Man United's defense is particularly good when they don't set up deep 5-4-1 and just look to stay in a very compact shape and then hit teams on transitions and win games like that, like they did against Arsenal in the Cup, like they did against Liverpool away at Anfield. And as such, given they'll probably play a bit more of an aggressive style of football, a bit more traditional Ruben Amorim, I think starting Jimenez is fine. Brentford obviously have conceded a lot of goals this season. And so starting Sarr is absolutely fine as well. I don't see any issues with that. Forest are obviously one of the better defences this season, but Semenyo seems to always rise to the occasion. Last three hauls, United, City, Chelsea, big games, You can laugh at the United one if you would like, but I think the stature of it, players still feel like it's a big game. And I imagine he'll interpret Forest the same, given that they're flying high in third. They'll want to beat him. And Bournemouth themselves are absolutely flying as well, right? And they'll probably fancy themselves for a top 4, top 5 finish. And why not? Why shouldn't they? I think they should. So I don't think they'll make it, but I think they should fancy themselves for sure. So for me, I wouldn't bench Semenyo. I'd actually probably start him over both. I'd definitely start him over Sarr. Whether I'd start him over Jimenez, I'm not so sure. But if you assume reduced expected minutes, it's fine. I just don't like the prospect of benching Semenyo, given out of the three, he's probably the best player. He's so dangerous. Robinson, I'm more open to benching. I think a lot of squads where Robinson is an issue, you have such a strong defense already, maybe like Lewis Hall, plus Gabriel, plus a Liverpool defense, that'll be very template this week. And if you don't have him, then Lewis Hall, then it'll probably be a toss-up between Robinson and Munoz. That's close. That's really close. Personally, I'm playing Robinson. I think Brentford are going to score. Munoz is more likely to get a attacking return, and he's far more likely to get a goal. Pretty much all of Robinson's attacking returns, well, at least this season, they do reside in the assist category. He never really looks like scoring. I think Bournemouth are going to score. I think Forest are due a bit of a decline, personally, and it's not from a statistical perspective where you're like, oh, they must experience a regression now. I just don't think their side is third place in the league good. And this is coming from someone who's quite high on Forest initially. I think they're a little bit lower than that. And so I think they'll drop a few points here and there. And going away to Bournemouth is a tough place to go. Yeah, I think Bournemouth scores, so I'd be benching Ole Einar, and that about covers it. Given the number of people who have not yet decided on what they are going to do with regards to who they are going to be bringing in for the Liverpool assets, whether they are going to be bringing in Liverpool assets, I thought I would discuss it yet again, albeit in a slightly different manner. I'm very comfortable now accepting the small to medium risk in choosing Konate over Virgil van Dijk. I do not think the 1.3 million difference in price is justified through the difference between them in terms of the likelihood of them scoring a goal and the expected minutes. I put quotation marks around the security of expected minutes because if Konate is fit, I just see 90, 90, 90, 90, right? The only thing is whether he's fit and whether we see a reoccurrence of an injury. Now, when someone's injury prone and they're playing through the pain, obviously that's more likely, right? But I'm happy to accept that risk and hope that Liverpool manage him well. And I think they will, right? And just get through at least a 4-game span where he doesn't get a reoccurring injury. Also, the probability of getting injured in like a single game is actually very small. So even over a 4-game span, it's not too big either. So yeah, and he's done well to hold out till now. So I think that's fine. And then as I expressed yesterday, Ipswich, very, very difficult to score against them from set pieces, from direct set pieces at least, where you cross it into the box, because they were second best in the Championship last season for that statistic. They obviously have a big side. They're very well drilled in that sense. City took pretty much every single corner short, if not every single corner, and they didn't do that by accident, right? They had a lot of respect for what Ipswich boasted in the box, and traditionally City are actually okay from scoring from set pieces as well, right? Stones' goals, Guardiola's goals, you can think of a few. So yeah, I wouldn't personally think that he's too likely to score. Everton away in the double, tough. Bournemouth away in the double, medium, but medium to tough, I would say. And then Wolves at home is lovely, but it's not like Konate is inept in the air where he's literally just going to be standing there like a snowman, not moving. Moving on to Cody Gakpo. I gave this some thought because I want to see not roughly, but specifically where he was at in terms of what his actual expected points are to be like. Not in terms of what a model would say, but how I can see games going and the attributes that he has to contribute to a score. And this is what I came up with. He's got very good ball striking. You put him in and around the zone, and he can deliver for you, right? You've seen that on a number of times this season. And the times that he's popping up in those positions compared to maybe some other forwards is good. It's good enough, right? Whereby he can leverage that ball striking at a high enough volume to actually access a fairly decent ceiling, even though he hasn't been doing that so often. And that's what I mean by his overall late to final action volume. Like he's in and around those positions, and then he's executing on that, right? Whether it be a pass, whether it even be a cross, his crosses are pretty decent, or just shooting as well. And then the avenues to goals. He can score going across the keeper. He can score when he cuts inside. He can score with his head. Some players are a little bit more one-dimensional. Like, for example, Ian Robin, in terms of like his avenues to goal, or it's left foot, cut inside, whip it into the other side of the goal, right? Into the top corner. Obviously, he could pull it across, but, in general, there was less avenues to goals. Now, he was a top player, so it's less important for him. But when Gakpo's not quite at that level, having avenues to goals and multiple avenues to goals is very helpful. And as such, I think the floor at least should be fine, right? With all those fundamentals, I think his floor should be fine. And I express why I think potentially with the volume of positions that he takes up, the amount of time he takes up good positions, he should be okay for a ceiling and being able to access that, right? I don't think it's so unrealistic, even though he's not got many hauls so far this season. Am I expecting him to haul 16, 17 pointers consistently? Probably not, but he's very good in the bonus point system. So he gets one return, and maybe he's like a little bit more of a aggressive Chris Wood. Probably be slightly less consistent, but when he hits, he'll hit a little bit bigger. Those are the three taken into account. I'm not talking about Alisson. I've done it so much. I really don't like it. I think it compromises your squad structure significantly because by putting that money into him, it acts as a blocker down the line because you're not going to be able to get it out so easily, especially if you buy him and you don't have someone else to play in 29. That's another player you need to take out. Making transfers on goalkeepers isn't the most efficient thing as well. So there's just a lot of things I don't like about it. His ceiling himself, probably the lowest out of everyone. At least Konate can score a goal, right? But for Alisson to return a lot of points in one game, well, he'll have to make multiple saves. He'll have to keep a clean sheet, and other people can't overtake him on the bonus system. So many conditions which are very difficult to meet in general for him, particularly. So I really don't like it. If you want to go there, obviously your team do your thing. I just really don't like it. And then lastly, you may see no mention of Trent Alexander-Arnold, but the last point is about him. Let's say you preferred Mateta to Wissa, and you also had Gakpo, and you like Gakpo, and you're going to go Mateta, Gakpo, Isak. Well, it's quite expensive, right? So you're going to need to take some funds out from other positions. And let's say, in addition to that, you didn't want to get rid of Foden or Bruno, or maybe both. And as such, you would just wanted to have more money in your midfield and forward line, and you also had to facilitate Brian Mbeumo. And even if you sold Bruno to Brian Mbeumo, it's not the biggest price difference. Okay, and you need to find the cash from somewhere. With Konate existing in the current state that he does, I do not think it is such a bad thing to go for him over Trent. I do not think Trent is essential if you don't have him. I even saw one spot yesterday on our Diamond Call where I suggested to someone that they could actually sell him and it would improve their team. He didn't agree, but naturally that's fine. I'm just making the argument that I don't think he's essential. He's only got 13 points more than Van Dijk this season. That's not that many, especially when you consider the price. And I don't think the games are slam dunks for him getting attacking returns. And in general, obviously, we've seen it's been harder for him to return, given, one, Arnie slot system, but two, return big because of the changes to the bonus structure. So whilst he's still the second best asset, and I don't particularly think that's too much of a debate, at least, well, he's the best defensive asset. Him versus Gakpo is a bit harder, but he's the best defensive asset in isolation. In context, I think it's a lot closer than maybe it's being made out to be. So that's my wrap up on Liverpool. And now let's move on to Chris Wood. Should you be selling Chris Wood? Should you be selling the man that has done your rank so much good this season and done my rank so much damage this season? I think so. I really do. On the assumption he acts as the blocker to Cody Gakpo. Now, if you wanted to sell him for Mateta or a Wissa, I still think that's fine. I still think there's enough upside there to take, whereby I'm cool with it. Now, there's a few reasons why I'm looking to sell him. One, and the main one, is the fixtures, and we'll come on to that. Two, I think we'll see a regression in his output, not for the reasons of from a statistical standpoint, just also a footballing and a tactical one, and we'll come on to that. I don't think that's just because I expect a Forest decline, but also a decline in him individually, which we'll come on to. Talking about the immediate term, though, first, I don't think the fact that Callum Hudson-Odoi is out for this game is a good thing for him. One, I think they've established a very good relationship, and when I watch Forest and I watch them two play together, I think Callum Hudson-Odoi is a wonderful facilitator almost for Wood to score on a fairly consistent basis because he's not selfish at all. And in terms of what he's looking to do, he's not always looking to shoot like you associate that more with Madueke, but he really is looking to provide for Chris Wood. And I think they also have a very good understanding on the pitch, irrespective of how unselfish Callum Hudson-Odoi is. This particular game for Bournemouth, I actually thought the pairing of Forest's wingers is wonderful and one of the best to have against Bournemouth. You have someone who is probably more associated with being a carrier and a runner in Alanga, and then you have someone who's a little bit more associative, someone you can put the ball into in these high-pressure situations, and he'll retain it, and he can just essentially keep your attack going because he won't lose the ball in these small spaces, and he has such good quality in there. That's not to say that, for example, Callum Hudson-Odoi is a bad carrier or a bad runner. He's not, and just where like Alanga's not as good with the associative stuff, he's not as good as Odoi, but he's not bad or anything. But I still think losing the quality of it away in this time of game isn't particularly useful because you want a bit of both, right? And the game that came to mind was the Sancho game or the Chelsea game away at Bournemouth. We were having a shocking time of it. Sancho came on, and he's probably far closer in profile to Callum Hudson-Odoi than most players. And just look how good of a performance he had. Because against this aggressive Bournemouth side, having someone who can hold the ball in these advanced, smaller spaces and be associative, but also still be a threat in transition is still very, very, very useful, right? So I think not having that and then also taking away the relationship between Hudson-Odoi and Wood isn't particularly helpful. This fixture is interesting because, as I've expressed so many times, I like having strikers against Bournemouth, given the way they play, and I still do. So I think that's a plus for Wood. But the overall fixture set, even Bournemouth away, is still a very tough place to go. And most people don't haul there, right? So you are somewhat limited in your ceiling. Then after, you've got Brighton, you've got Fulham, you've got Arsenal, you've got City. I think there's Newcastle, maybe in and around there. It might actually be after Fulham as well. That is a tough run. That is a really tough run. And then when you combine the fact that I think Forest gone on somewhat of a decline at some point, and I personally think it'll be in somewhat near future, and the fact that he's been so consistent, right? But he hasn't been hauling big. And because he's not been hauling big, if he is to go on a run where he's not as consistent, it's hard for him to catch up on the points that he's missed because he's not going to do a Brian Mbeumo or a Foden or a Salah or a Palmer where he just blitz 20 points in one game, right? So for me, given he could act as a blocker to Cody Gakpo, and Gakpo has better fixtures, and he's got an extra game, I personally am okay with the sell. But obviously, there's so many positives associated with Wood and Forest and how well they're playing. And just because I expect a decline doesn't mean I expect them to fall off the cliff. I just don't think they'll be as good in terms of results, at least. And as such, there's still a lot of good reasons to hold him. But for me, personally, where he acts as a blocker to Cody Gakpo, or a Mateta if you're really bullish on him, or a Wissa if you're really bullish on him, I personally think it's okay to sell. And then lastly, before we move on to a little bit of chip strategy, slightly new perspective there. Should you sell Bruno Fernandes? I think to keep him, you have to have strong conviction because the fixtures are open to interpretation. I think they're okay, personally. I don't think they're that bad. Fulham away is not nice, but after that, they're all right. And the other thing is he's expensive. He's actually quite expensive. So he could act as a blocker not only to Brian Mbeumo, but potentially even a Trent if you don't have him already, or a Van Dijk if you really prefer him, or a Gakpo, or anyone else, right? Even a Foden. Like I don't think you should be moving to Foden, like at least in terms of keeping Foden. So for all of those reasons, if you're willing to sacrifice all of that, you must have strong conviction in Bruno Fernandes. If you don't have a strong conviction, I would be okay holding or selling just because Bruno is so secure in terms of points over like a medium term span, because he has penalties, because of his quality. He'll return you points. It's just whether you're losing a lot indirectly by holding someone of that price. So I think it becomes a lot closer otherwise. I'm okay with selling because it is Fulham away, and I think this is probably his worst fixture in the short term. So getting rid of him for that, and then what will be after. There's so many attractive options. Brian Mbeumo is probably not going to score less points than him in this period, and as such, it's a very easy to move to make. And like I said, if he acts as a blocker to any of the other Liverpool guys, I think again it's a good reason to justify a transfer. Lastly, chip strategy. I've expressed my preference for not having to play the triple captain chip in game week 24. And last night on the Diamond Call, I got presented a solution of sorts to it. You could, and I'm just throwing this idea out there because I kind of liked it, so I was like, I'll chuck it out there. Because I know in general, the excitement around playing this triple captain on Salah 24 due to the fixtures he has, and the fact that everyone's doing it to an extent, certainly makes it a little bit less appealing. Right? But you could, in theory, go David Moyes in 24. You'll have one game which attacks the 5-team rule to open you up to the outside. And the other game is Leicester at home. So hopefully you expect, like, let's just say a 2-1 Everton win. You get 8 points out of that. Not the worst result in the world. And let's just hope, well, if you're going to play it on Moyes, you obviously expect, to some extent, Everton to get a result. Let's give them a draw. And let's say it's like a 1-1 draw. They'll get 9 points there. And you'll be on 17 points with 2 games to go. In the following game week, you move to Marco Silva, who's Nottingham Forest at home. And let's just assume again that they draw. I'm not going to be super bullish, but I won't be so pessimistic. 8 points, but let's say this is like a 2-2 draw. All right, that's 10 points. You're now on what? 27? 27 with a game to go, and then you look, basically target the 5-team rule again in game week 26. That's not such a bad return. Like, I haven't even given you a single win so far, and let's just say you get a draw and like a 1-1 draw as well. That's another 9 points, and you finish on 36. 36 points is not so bad from the assistant manager chip. And I haven't even given you one win, right? So I've taken all of that upside away from you. But if you have mass conviction in Everton doing something, or thrashing Leicester, and then producing against Liverpool, or you think Fulham really do go on to beat Nottingham Forest, and you think there's more value to be had in the triple captainship down the line, or if you think Salah just fails, people use the triple captainship, let's say they get like 6 points out of it. Okay, fine, maybe your assistant manager does above average with the results I've given you, but you really cash in down the line on the triple captain. I think it's just a strategy that should be considered at least. Just something to be considered if you really were anti-playing a triple captain now. That is all she wrote for this game week's content, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you enjoyed the content this week. I must say this position for the mic is actually not so bad. So maybe we'll have some stable audio from now on. Actually, no, we will definitely have some stable audio from now on, because regardless of what I have to do, I will do it. If you have enjoyed, consider subscribing for all of the reasons discussed earlier, or if you just enjoyed the video. Similarly, let's try and get this video to 400 likes. I know it's coming out a little bit later than usual, so maybe that's a little bit tougher, but I'm sure you guys can do it. It doesn't take too much effort. And finally, and most importantly, I wish you the best of luck for this game week. I imagine it'll be a little bit swingy, actually. I can see it being like that, so I hope it all works in your favor. And if you are interested in joining the community, then of course the link is in the description below. Like I said, I wish you the best of luck for this game week. Goodbye, and I shall see you very soon on Sunday for a very interesting transfer plans. Goodbye.